When I started with the Fantastic Four, and then Spider-Man and the Hulk and Daredevil and the X-Men and Iron Man and so forth, we were becoming superhero specialists.
Well, comics have captured the imagination probably since people started drawing on caves 30,000 years ago.
I think comics work because it's a really good way to tell stories. And comics can tell any kind of story there is.
Everyone always says that the only true American art form is jazz, but that's really not true. We created jazz and we created, the comic book.
Comics is where all pop culture starts today.
It's telling stories, it's adventure, it's fun, it's rock and roll. It's the best art form that ever existed, the best art form that ever existed.
I like the fans a lot. They're all really cool. They're all really good people. Yeah.
It's an ability to be able to get out of the mundane life and escape to where you can fly. It's where you can sparkle.
May the mystic orb of Agamotto shine on you.
I don't dress like this to be ignored, damn it.
80% of the time, people really probably shouldn't be dressed as Superman.
Mommy, that man's wearing his underwear.
You know, statistically speaking, flying's still the safest way to travel.
This is their way of connecting, and this is their way of expressing that this is a character who's meant something to them.
I've always wanted to be Batman, and this is the only place where you can legally and sanely be looked at as Batman.
It's very important to match the writer with a really great artist, or a great colorist, also a great editor. All those things have to work together just right to get a great book.
The purpose of a comic book is to tell a story.
At their core, comic books are about character. Either you like that character or you don't, and not just because he can climb a wall. You like Spider-Man because he's Peter Parker, who can climb a wall.
It's a more popular time for superheroes than it's been in 20 years.
The main draw for people to read comics and go to conventions is it really allows you to go into a different world, into a world outside of this.
It's a really good time for comics. That's superheroes, that's human drama. I mean, something for everybody. From the 6-year-old kid to the 80-year-old man that's been in comics his whole life.
People are attracted to adventure, to stories, to imagination.
Right now, in comics, I think we have the best material being published with the most broad diversity of all time.
There's a real instantaneousness of the communication in comics that doesn't exist in a lot of other areas.
I'm the luckiest guy in the world, so I want to do this. It's a great life. I get up every day, I think about Superman and Batman, I go to bed.
Everyone who reads comic books is now sitting at the Cool Kids table. Everyone who creates comics is now sitting at the Cool Kids table. And it's about time, because there's a lot of really great ideas coming out of kids who are now sitting at the Cool Kids table.
A comic book. And the reason they're called comic book is the original comic books were reprints of the comics that were in newspapers. So they took this pamphlet was basically, the reason it was this size, and it wasn't this size, they were actually larger and they were cost a dime. But the reason it was like this is that they could get so many cuts on a sheet of paper at that size. And then they could fold it, and then it was newsprint on the inside, the same thing that the newspaper was printed on, and then they took like the magazine slick paper or the ad slick, and put it to wrap it so that it would stand up in the newsstand.
Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, who had done a comic book about a Superman. Now, when they first did it, he was a villain. And then they did it again, he was a hero. And they tried to sell it, as all kids do, to the syndicated strips.
Action Comics #1 comes out, Superman hits, and you have never seen to this day, and probably never will see, an explosion in pop culture like that.
Faster than a speeding bullet, more powerful than a locomotive, able to leap tall buildings at a single bound. The infant of Krypton is now the Man of Steel, Superman.
The way Superman hit, not only was he in 1 million comic books a month, but he's in the newspapers before long, he's on movie screens, he's on the radio, this is all within a year or two. And if you can imagine something like The Simpsons, or something that has been a huge cultural influence in our lifetime, the impact with which that stuff hit doesn't compare to the penetration, the impact that happened in the 1930s.
So they said to all their creators that they could talk to, create a superhero. Forget the detectives and the cowboys. We don't want to do those anymore. Make superheroes.
And that kicked off what we call, again, the golden age of comics. Comics were huge during the 1940s, in part because a lot of overseas servicemen were reading them because they're easy to read. You can stick them in your back pocket, you can carry them around. Will Eisner, who created The Spirit, was the first guy to really bring a cinematic sense to comics, like a real sort of he took a lot of what he saw in films of the 40s and was informed by that, and it didn't so much look like simple comic strips. He would bring that sort of the weird camera angles and the interesting cinematography and bring that back to comics, and he was a huge influence. By the early 1950s, TV's beginning to come into its own. Circulations in magazines in general is just dropping, and there are also some scares from social activists saying that comics are maybe bad for kids and maybe they're promoting negative values.
There was a psychiatrist. He attributed every ill that was known to mankind to comic books. Claimed that they were ruining the younger generation, and there were articles in the newspapers and magazines.
And right next to communists being tried in Congress, comic books were being tried in Congress. Comic books were nearly destroyed.
So to protect themselves, the comic book publishers formed an association. I think it was called the Comic Magazine Association of America, and they were a self-censorship body. All the publishers had to submit all the pages to them before they would go to the printer.
It wasn't until after 1953 that habit in America began, telling your kid not to read a comic book.
Parents, as they often do, got scared of their own kids. The juvenile delinquency thing, such a threat. And of course looked for reasons besides the fact that they were probably rotten parents for why their kids were misbehaving. They attached themselves to comic books just as they now do to video games.
And so all of these things contributed to a real shrinking of the marketplace in the early 1950s. And there were still comics published, but superheroes all but went away as a genre. A lot of horror comics went away as a genre. And then in the mid-50s, DC Comics relaunched some of its superheroes just kind of on a flyer. So Flash comes out in 1956, huge success. Let's try it again. We do with Green Lantern, another huge success. And so this begins what we now retroactively call the Silver Age of comics.
All of comic books sits between these two characters. Superman, the greatest, most powerful superhero of all. Batman, the least powerful superhero. He's not bitten by a radioactive spider. Nobody came down and hit him with a lightning bolt and made him super fast. Nothing happened to him except his parents were killed. And he became the other end of superheroes in comics. These two characters delineated what comic books and what superheroes were to become. Superhero comic books.
Well, I was lucky. I was also lucky enough to work with some of the most talented artists in the business. And no matter what I wrote, they made it look good. I think they made my stories look better than they were. That whole style of exaggerated action and great heroism and terrific drama in every panel. I was the luckiest guy in the world. I had the greatest artists. Jack Kirby, John Buscema, Gil Kane, Gene Colan, John Romita Jr. was like that.
When I did Thor, when I did the Hulk, it was Kirby reference on my walls because that is such powerful stuff. The weight and the power of those characters, just, oh man.
My publisher felt that comics were read by very young children and very stupid adults. And he didn't like me using words of more than 2 syllables. He didn't want me to play up characterization. That was a waste of time to him. And all he wanted was a lot of action and, you know, a lot of costumes and running around. And it was a job, and I did what he wanted. And I had been doing it for years. But there reached a point where I said to my wife, honey, I want to quit. You know, I'm sick of writing this kind of stuff. I want to do something else. So she said to me, because my wife is the wisest and most beautiful woman in the world, she said to me, why don't you do one book the way you want to do it? The worst that happens is Martin will fire you, but you want to quit anyway, so what? So I figured, fine, but I'll do it my way.
So Stan took his 4 people go out into space and get turned into monster story and became the Fantastic Four.
So I didn't give them secret identities. I had a girl in it. She was a fighting member of the team. I tried to do everything differently.
Basically, Stan's biggest contribution to the industry was he took one-dimensional characters and made them two-dimensional. It was a major step forward in the 1960s because suddenly characters had problems. Suddenly characters were more like the people you know, or they had problems that you could relate to.
One of the things that makes characters seem real is you give them real problems. I mean, how often do you read a comic book or see a movie where in the middle of the action, the guy has a toothache and has to go to the dentist, has to go to the bathroom? You have to believe such a character could exist, and there has to be something about him or her that makes you interested. See, I feel if you can just read the dialogue and know by the dialogue who is speaking, then you've got good characterization. In other words, no 2 characters should speak the same way. Now, it's easy to say Spider-Man is my favorite because he's the most famous, but I loved them all. I love Doctor Strange. I love Sergeant Fury. I love Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. I love Daredevil. I love the Hulk. I love the Silver Surfer. I love Galactus. I love Doctor Doom. Loved them all. Spider-Man was unusual, though, because when I told him I wanted to do Spider-Man, I wanted him to be a teenager, a guy with a lot of problems, blah, blah, blah. Oh, man, he hated the idea. He didn't want to publish the book in the worst way. He said, first of all, Stan, people hate spiders. You can't call a hero Spider-Man. Then he said, you can't make him a teenager. Teenagers can only be sidekicks. A hero can't be a teenager. And then he said, and you want him to have problems and not have enough money and he's not that popular with girls? Stan, don't you know what a hero is? And really, I think he got mad at me. So I didn't do the Spider-Man book, but later we had a book called Amazing Fantasy that we were about to kill. It wasn't selling too well. Well, when you're killing a book, nobody cares what you put in the last issue because you're killing it anyway. So just to get it out of my system, I put Spider-Man in that book, featured him on the cover. When the sales came in, the sales results, a few months later, we learned it was the best-selling book we had had in a long time. So my publisher called me in and he said, Stan, you remember that character Spider-Man of yours that we both liked so much? Why don't we do a series of it? And that's really how it happened.
Everywhere else, Japan, England, comic books are a normal thing. You can see people on the subway reading comics, as here it's kind of like an underground thing. So it's totally different over there as opposed to over here.
I'm a closet comic book collector. I mean,
Closeted?
reader.
What do you mean by that?
Like, I don't tell anybody about it.
Why not?
Because it's just, you know, it's embarrassing.
How do you think people perceive comic book fans?
Geeks, basically, and nerds with you know, Mick Jobs.
Glasses, overweight or underweight.
Well, a lot of us are viewed upon as geeks and dorks and nerds and all that good stuff.
We are the other.
The other people?
Yes, we are the other people.
They freak out. They're like, what are you people doing? We're like those people who camp out for Star Wars before the movie comes out. That's what we are. And people, they get a little scared, a little creeped out. But I think once they kind of see what we're doing, they kind of like, oh, yeah, that's cool. They're all dressed up and doing stuff. They're still crazy, but they look cool.
But I'm the first person to call myself a comic book geek when they say, hey, what do you like to do in your spare time? I'm a comic book geek. I'm proud of it. You know, I'm a grown man, I have a good job, I have a family, but I like comics.
It takes a very special woman, I think, to deal with their boyfriends being retarded dorks like me, so, you know.
You know what? Support your local nerd. Nerds need love, too. You know, being a nerd has become popular, become cool. Like nerd movies, comic book movies, superhero movies, Ghostbusters coming back. I mean, they're the #1 movies, so it's finally cool to be a nerd.
Even with all the movies and all the other stuff coming out now, you know, still got to get past that stigma of like the dingy little comic book store and a bunch of dorks in there. There's too much good stuff going on in comic books these days to be that narrow-minded.
It's just the way it is, society, human nature, it's just the way it is. You know, people are going to be judgmental, no matter what.
I would like to believe I wouldn't show up to a convention dressed as Green Lantern as a grown man, but if that's how you connect, if that's what you need, that's the, you know, who am I to judge?
I love coming out and meeting the fans at some of these Comic-Cons. They're kind of my favorite people in a way. They're usually pretty smart. They know all the storylines, they know the characters, they have personal identifications with things, whether they be sentimental or really just thought-provoking. They appreciate stories, art, characters. I think the comic fans are some of the kindest people I know. There's a lot of subcultures out there, you know, that are not very nice. And the comic fans are the best. They're kind, they want to have fun, they love things, they have appreciation. These are all great qualities in human beings, you know.
Frank Miller is a genius. I mean, he is great. He's a great artist. He's a fabulous writer, and he does his own thing.
Batman was a dead character when Frank did Dark Knight, and he single-handedly revived the character.
About to turn 30 and realized that I was about to become older than Batman and I couldn't tolerate that, so I better make the guy an old fogey.
Remember that Frank's Batman is a 55-year-old man, and it takes place in the future. But Frank's Batman, when he was younger, is my Batman.
I consider Neal Adams to be my mentor. I came to New York and I looked up the best artist in comics, and it was Neal Adams, and I looked him up in the phone book, he was listed. And I called him up, and I got his studio, and he said, sure, come on over.
Frank came up to my studio. My daughter was at the reception desk, my daughter Chris. Her standing order was to keep young artists out as much as possible. I don't know what he did to get through her, but she's got a sixth sense for people. I talked to him, which means I got to stop my work. You know, I have a busy day. Okay, show me the work. And he showed me the work.
And he told me my stuff was absolutely terrible, and that I should go back to Vermont and forget about it, and I'd never be any good.
This may be the worst portfolio I've ever seen. It's awful. He said, well, what can I do to fix it?
He told me this many, many times. As I kept coming back, and he kept showing me more and teaching me more.
It would take me all day, and I would just scratch the surface. Well, can you give me an hour? I don't think so. It's just too much. Frank, do something else. Find something else to do.
Never an encouraging word, until one day he called some of his compadres over, which were some of the best artists in the field, including the legendary Russ Heath, and showed him my stuff, and he said, this guy can't draw, but his storytelling is pretty good. And one of them said, he can draw, and Neal said, no, he can't. And then Neal reached for his phone and just picked it up and dialed a number and said, I got somebody. And I got my first job.
I was so totally wrong about Frank. It's one of those like lessons that you learn, you know? I never really say no to anybody because it's just as easy to be wrong as it is to be right. If somebody's willing to put up with harsh criticism, I give it to them, they make something out of it or they don't. Frank Miller made Frank Miller out of it. And people say, are you responsible for making Frank? No, Frank Miller is. He put himself into the grinder and he came out the other side an artist. What do you say?
Without sin, there is no virtue. These are people who survive in a hostile environment. You look at these are all tales about loyalty and love and honor. 20 years ago, Sin City wouldn't have been published. And you know, now it didn't just get published, it got completely embraced. First by the comic book audience, then by a wider book audience, and then finally by the audience that came to see the movie. That's a real sign of how comics have changed. Sin City is now probably one of the more mainstream titles out there. Mickey brought even more pathos to Marv than I ever had done in my drawings. And Clive Owen brought very, very wicked wit to his performance of Dwight. And I'm just naming the guys. I'm not talking about Rosario Dawson, who, I mean, I can draw whatever I want, but nothing's gonna replace Rosario Dawson or Jamie King and wonderful Brittany Murphy. I was astonished by Bruce Willis because he brought no irony to the part at all. And now he's renowned for his irony. Die Hard, the classic Bruce Willis smirk. I mean, everybody's referred to that. And that worried me because Hartigan's a completely unsmirky character. And there's one moment where he's stabbing a stiletto into Ixtal, and his line is simply sucker. And I was on pins and needles, thinking that he'd give a grin or something, and he just played it completely cold. And I went, that's Hartigan. That's not John McClane. You know, he has completely created Hartigan for me.
You go to a movie theater and you look at previews. Half the previews, nearly a third to a half, are about comic book superheroes. That's phenomenal.
Another great thing is that you have all these geeks that grew up on comic books who now are in positions of power to make movies and TV shows. And that wasn't the case 20 years ago.
I think it's a natural progression from comics to movies because of the storyboarding aspect of it. And I think Hollywood is picking up on some of the talent in comics. I mean, Frank Miller is one of them. At the very least, the ideas in comics are plentiful, and anybody with a half a brain should salvage those ideas, and if not plagiarize them, then bounce off them.
When you've got movies making $1 billion+ that have guys running around in tights, you know, there's something to that.
We started licensing our first project, a character I created called The Mask, back in 1989. And it was a big hit. Most people don't know that The Mask was a comic book. We followed that right up with Time Cop, another movie based on a comic.
I mean, the early Superman series, maybe it was great for its time, but by the time I was seeing it as a kid, it was really dated. But that was what you had. You know, if you wanted to see Superman on television, that's pretty much what you had. And there were, again, rare events that are fantastic moments where you're like, ah, that's the way it should be done. Why can't anybody see why that's the way it's supposed to be done? Richard Donner's Superman, which is still my favorite Superman movie.
Seeing the original movie in 1979 was, next to buying the Batman comic, the second most transformative moment of my life. And I so love that movie, and it made all the difference in my life. January 26, 1979. I don't remember the date I lost my virginity, but I remember that date. I was a kid without much parental guidance. I was a latchkey kid. I grew up, I was a couple of years ahead in school, so I didn't really have a lot of peer groups because I was a little runty kid. And I went into that movie theater liking Superman, kind of because I'd seen him in other places and I read Superman comics, but I came out of that movie theater loving Superman. That was a transformative moment. That was the big watershed moment in my life.
You just never know. You never know how this stuff's how when a comic book is turned into a movie, how it's gonna hit the mainstream, you know? The ones that work the best are the ones that stay the truest to the comics. Don't say you wanna make a movie of something and then change it. It just seems crazy to me.
And some comic book fans are more forgiving than others. Some of them it's heresy if they screw up the concept.
When there's a beloved comic book character that comes from, your favorite comic books that you store under your bed at home, you want that person playing it on film to be true to that, of course. I would too. So I don't blame the fanboys. I actually appreciate the fanboys for keeping me on my task.
I think they've made comic books what they can potentially be, larger than life, big and epic and beautiful, and yet I still like it on the small screen. I love Smallville because it is the boy who became Superman, and yet Superman in the movies is amazing. I love The Dark Knight. I thought that was such a great film, and it captured, the darkness of Batman and Gotham and all of that.
Favorite comic they've turned into a movie? I loved Hellboy, loved Ghost World. Spider-Man 2 was really great. The first Doctor Strange movie wasn't very good, but hopefully they'll do that, and if they do it right, that'd be a great movie. You hear that, Hollywood?
Why go through all this hassle to dress up? What's the attraction to doing this?
She's a kick-ass character. I mean, there's just no getting around it. She is super powerful. She's got a cool design. She's very unique. So there aren't a lot of other characters out there. There's lots of princesses and Sailor Scouts and all that kind of stuff, but Cosmos kicks ass.
Okay, why don't you tell us who you're dressed as?
I'm dressed as the manga version of Super Sailor Moon.
Okay, and you are?
And I am Super Sailor Uranus. It's fun to get dressed up as a character you're passionate about and come down here and mingle with other people that have the same kind of hobbies.
When I was 13 years old, I saw Sailor Moon for the first time, and I just thought it was the coolest thing ever. So, and it's just been a downhill ride from there.
I am Spectro, Defender of Free Love.
Well, I am Jedi Elvis, which is just kind of my imagination of what Elvis would be like if he was a Jedi. This is about as much rhinestones as a guy can wear and not be questioned. So.
I've been doing costumes for a long time. I just still get a big kick out of seeing people's faces light up and everything. When you bring in something cool, it's like, whoa, amusing. And so I've just had a lot of fun with it. Originally put about 300 hours into it real quick to get it done for WonderCon Masquerade. The helmet itself this is a St. Patty's Day foam tome, a trash can, and this is the bubble packaging over a toilet brush I bought at Target. So it's just a lot of hunting.
As you can see, this kind of design doesn't have a pattern, so you have to come up with things on your own of how you're going to adjust things to actually fit a real person's body.
This is an old
old cape that I ripped apart, and I had an old shirt, and I just cut the sleeves and twisted them, and then I borrowed the cape from her brother.
Okay, cool.
And I looked on a website for how to do the makeup, and then I just threw all the makeup on.
I'm actually a sports mascot, so I dress up just about every day to go to work. I just like seeing the kinds of costumes people make and sorts of characters that it's always a surprise. You never know what you're going to see. You never know what people are going to dress up as. It's just really a lot of imagination, a lot of creativity. It's a lot of fun.
Well, cosplay it's a word that originated in Japan, so it's derived from costume and then play. We'll put together, what we think should be used for the fabric, what type of material we should get. Then we go downtown to the fabric district, pick it out, and then it's always good to have a nice prop. This one's probably one of my favorite pieces that I've made because the stitch work on it ended up coming out so very clean, and especially the collar and stuff came out very seamless. This is the best costume that she's ever made. She looks amazing. She took so much time and effort. This is your best costume, Jenna.
Yay!
Like us, there are the greater number of people will cosplay, for fun, because they love a character, because they love a show, because they love, to make things. There are some girls that I know who never compete. They just make costumes simply because they love to make costumes. They love to sew. But it's getting to be a very big community of people.
You have those that's cool, and then you have those that say, oh, there's a geek. I mean, face it, most people think of people who wear a costume as being geeky, but at the same time, they want to see that geekiness.
Well, I'm sure that there's the ones that truly appreciate it and those that sort of, cock an eyebrow.
It's no different than someone that goes to a Raiders game and puts a Viking or whatever eye patch on their thing, and these grown men dress up like that and go root for some fat guy running around a football field. It's no different. It just happens to be science fiction fantasy, so, who cares? Everybody seems to enjoy it anyway, and especially kids enjoy it, so that's a big plus.
It's all in fun, all just having a good time.
I think it's human nature to kind of look down on the, oh gosh, it's so childish or things like that. You're more like a kid, even though some people inside wish they were maybe more childlike.
And yeah, I get disparaging remarks, but I just kind of let them bounce off because it's the children that appreciate us. And yeah, as you get older, they're not going to get out of it. And teenagers, they think, I'm cooler than that or whatever. You're not the real Batman. To the little kids, you are.
It's just for fun, obviously. I mean, I don't take myself too seriously, and I think everybody else kind of gets that vibe, and they love it.
Well, I've been dressed up since I was little. I'm always wearing capes, and my mom always making me swords, and me running with my neighbor friends, just playing He-Man, G.I. Joe, and Star Wars characters. I remember when I was little and I watched Star Wars with my dad. I saw Boba Fett, and I just loved the whole mask, and he was this cool character and pretty badass. No one knew about him. I was like, I want that costume. I remember making my first one out of cardboard, and it looked really, really cheesy looking. As I got older,
you made it yourself?
I made it myself. As I got older, I made the costume, so I'm kind of living my childhood dream being Boba Fett. And it's great having little kids come up and saying, wow, it's Boba Fett from the movie. Armor is this, it's called Sentra. It's a hard, thick type of plastic that's easy to mold. You just cut the squares out what you need. Get some heavy-duty scissors and cut them out, put them in your body, mold them, and then the blaster marks were just used with the lighter and pressed against them. Buttons here from a calculator. That's what they use in the actual movie.
Okay.
These pieces are actually bolts that are used for a carburetor put in there. I probably have 300 reference photos I went through online just to see every angle of the costume. Because I was always disappointed when I went to see someone's Boba Fett costume and I was like, doesn't look like the movie. 501st is an official Empire costuming group. We go to charity events, Lucas events, whenever we're needed. Lucas will call us, or charity events will call us up and say, we need you here, here, or here. Come with full costume. And basically, it's just a group of really cool people that are really awesome. We get together and we go to events and we dress up together. Trade tips on how to make costumes, and trade information, trade costumes.
So yeah, my whole family is a bunch of Star Wars nerds. We dress the dog up as a Ewok.
You dress your dog as an Ewok?
Yeah, with a little gown for him. So Star Wars is like a big part of our family.
I mean, it's just like Halloween, really. It's kind of fun, and where else are you going to do this?
They're real and spectacular.
If you're gonna go to a convention, you might as well go all the way, get dressed up, have a good time, have fun. Everybody, I mean, you can't walk 5 feet. You feel like a rock star. You can't walk 5 feet without a million people taking pictures with you.
If you want to costume, go ahead and do it. It doesn't matter if you don't look like the character. It's all about the love for the character.
I just want to say, don't be afraid to cosplay your favorite character, no matter how dorky they are. Just look at us. Thank you.
But you know, like even if you are an outcast and you're the only one in your group that you hang out with dressing up, you come here, everybody welcomes everybody.
Comics is a collaborative medium. It's a visual medium, yes, but it starts with a writer coming up with a story, coming up with a storyline. But I can't think of it as my story. Yes, if I'm coming up with a Superman story tomorrow, it is my story until I turn the script over to the editor and it goes to an artist. And at that point, you can't think of it as my story. It is our story now because the artist is going to bring his own perspective to the material. Maybe there's a way of pacing this sequence that he sees visually better than you do, that he's bringing his own skills and talents to it. If the writer is where the script begins, you know, the artist is the cinematographer, the guy who really kind of breaks it down and makes it visual.
It's just got to be strong storyline. To me, if it looks really pretty, I'm usually going to check it out. I'm usually drawn to like name writers though, you know, the guys that I know I've read before. Usually anything by them that comes out new, I'll read.
You can have something that's visually the most amazing thing in the world, and if you have a plot that's kind of rinky-dink, then you got nowhere to go.
I really like to haunt my characters and haunt my reader, because I think that we're all haunted by where we've been. And I like that aspect of storytelling. I like to kind of play up on that. It's something that we kind of overlook a lot of the time. We're dealing with the now and trying to build a future, and yet it's with everything we learned in the past.
And I like being creative. I want to be a storyteller, and that's what I'm pursuing, and hopefully I can pull it off.
Characters that are kind of one-dimensional, I don't really want to work on them. They don't interest me that much, but you know, I like to, you know, find out what a character does when he or she is not punching bad guys. So much angst-ridden storylines out there. I'm like, let's try I like to do the other stuff. I enjoy making it kind of fun and a little irreverent and, you know, sort of like out there.
The challenge to keeping it fresh, keeping the material fresh, with characters that have been around for 40, 50, 60 years, is twofold. First off, you look at the characters and you pare them down to their core and you figure out what worked and what the core of the character was. At the heart of it, Batman is a guy who wants vengeance on something that happened to him when he was a kid. At the core of it, the Hulk is all about the bottled up rage that everybody has in them at some point or another, and where does it go? You know, Spider-Man is about the fact that with great power comes great responsibility, which, as goofy a trope as it sounds to be, you know, there's still some truth to it. And then beyond that, you have to not treat it as a nostalgic exercise. You have to instead look at these characters and decide what works for today. How do you reflect the world outside your window today? Superman's a really good example. When Superman was first created in the 1930s, he was created as an agent of social activism. When you first saw him, he was busting up mobsters, but he was also going after like crooked bank examiners, and he was destroying, you know, munitions factories, and he was railing against the system. In the 50s, he becomes an agent of the status quo. He becomes a big blue Boy Scout who doesn't really face anything terribly threatening or terribly avant-garde. What we found over the years is that age range dropped and narrowed on Superman because the world's getting darker. Had to bear that in mind when we approached Superman, so we had to go back and look at the character and say we should rough him up a little bit. We should have him be willing to get his hands dirty a little bit and and be a little rougher around the edges. And I honestly think that's the kind of character that our audience today is going to respond to more than, you know, just another do-gooder.
What happened with Spider-Man was, I just felt I would give it to Jack Kirby because he was, I felt, the best superhero artist we had at the time. And I said to Jack, now look, I want you to do this differently than all the other characters. Don't make him look like Captain America. I don't want a big, heroic-looking guy with big muscles and a square jaw. And I said, just give me a typical teenager. Well, Jack is so good at superheroes that I guess he couldn't help himself. He did the first few pages, and the guy was too handsome and too powerful looking. So I said, forget it, Jack. And I called Steve Ditko, and he just got Spider-Man the way he should be, and Peter Parker the way he should be. And in those days, nobody knew Spider-Man was going to be a big thing. You know, Jack couldn't care less. He had a lot of other work to do. He said, okay, fine, give it to someone else. And I called Steve, and he did it, and then it turned into really the success that it was, and due in a large part to Steve, to the way he drew him. Later on, he helped me with the plots. He added a lot of things, his own ideas. He and Jack both were the greatest artists you could ever work with, because they not only drew beautifully, but they were good story people. And I think it's one of the reasons our stories were so successful, because we had a great way of working. The artist and me, we were true collaborators.
There's really two ways to work in this business. There's writing a full script, which is like writing a screenplay, where you have all the dialogue, you have everything, you have basically the call shots. It's almost like a movie script you're reading. The second way is what's called the Marvel style, and that's basically, it's what Stan Lee did in the early 60s, because he was writing 40 books a month. He would basically sit down and write a quick plot, hand it to Jack Kirby or one of the other artists, and they would run with it. And then he would come back and dialogue it after the fact.
There are writers that I have worked with who have never once spoken to their artist. Maybe an email here and there, maybe. Then there are artist and writer teams that, you know, basically come up with the ideas together. The writer might write it down, but the penciler's, you know, kind of in their ear saying, oh, then we should do this, then we should try this, and then the character would say this. So they work really well together.
I have a lot of great ideas, but I also recognize that it's not always the best idea. You know, and you bring somebody in like a Mark Waid, helps you really flesh things out. We had a great time with Hunter Killer. I've said to his face, and I've said to everyone else, that Mark Waid was one of my favorite collaborators I've ever had.
Being able to collaborate is the game itself. That is the game. Being able to find the people that can do what you need them to do, that will stay inspired, that will self-motivate, as opposed to being needed. You need to constantly, you know, kick them in the frickin' butt to do anything. That's something you got to identify early as a kind of leader of a rogue team of artists.
Working with Ron Mars on the Switchblade, I hope I can convey what his words give to me. He's great in that he doesn't tell me exactly what to draw all the time, but what he wants to convey is always evident in the work, and I just try to do my best in terms of just conveying that, and it's definitely inspiring to draw some of the cool stuff that he thinks of.
I love working with the new guys because they bring an enthusiasm and originality that, you know, nobody else can. But then there's the other side. You work with the pros, like, you know, Kieran Dwyer, Scott Hampton. I mean, these guys know how to tell a story. Richard Corbin doing Bigfoot, that was such a treat.
I've always said you can't teach art. You can teach skills, you can teach techniques, but you can't teach art. It's something a person really has to find on their own.
I don't have a conscious style. I've never had a conscious style. I wanted my stuff to look like my father when I was younger. Failing that, whatever came out. And I remember days where I tried to make a face. For instance, I tried to draw the Punisher in my second go-around with the character. I tried to make the Punisher look like Conan by John Buscema. And he got a chance to do a fill-in issue for me while I was doing the Punisher. And he calls me up and he says, I want you to know that I'm struggling to make the Punisher look like your Punisher. I said, what are you, nuts? That's Conan, you dummy. I just stole it from you. I just shortened his hair a little bit. He goes, get out of here. What a compliment, thank you very much.
I've always wanted to draw comic books, always. From, you know, the minute I, you know, realized I could sit there and draw, I was like, oh, I draw comic books. And so that's all I did. I drew comic books all the time. I just drew, you know, Batman fighting whoever, and just Superman, and just drew.
The truly exceptional artist is someone who can make you and I talking at this table look interesting. You know, and that's very hard to do. And that requires camera angles, you know, different shading, lighting, things like that. Anybody can draw, you know, Laura Croft, you know, taking a motorcycle ride across the Grand Canyon and have it look cool. That's not that hard to do, really. But having two guys sitting at a table discussing something is actually very hard to make look cool and interesting.
I think it's kind of an injustice to the inkers and the colorists when people call pencilers the artists and everyone else is just inkers and colorists, because I think together they, you know, create the art. Pencilers are just part of the process.
What an inker really does is add depth, texture, and feel. And they're real important. They're the lighting guys, in a way.
There is nothing quite as good as working with a good inker, and there's nothing as disappointing as working with a bad one. What the inker does is, in the end, everything's made up of lines, and he is the one that puts in the final line. Basically, the inks is the only thing that you see on the board at the end, because the pencil's all erased.
Right now I'm using Black Magic, and it's good. It does a really good job with the ink. It doesn't erase very easily, and you gotta be very, very careful with these inks because they're very fragile.
An inker can, you know, make or break the artwork. A good inker emphasizes the good stuff the artist drew and de-emphasizes the weaker stuff. So in many ways, they're sort of the first editor.
There's nothing as inspiring as just knowing that you have these people that can make something that you do that's good into something that ends up being great.
Once that's done, the inks are scanned into the computer, then it's sent to a colorist, and the colorist will then color it in.
Now, with the ability of the colorist with computer separation, it's amazing. Oh, I can't get over how well it looks.
I think it just comes down to, would you rather look at something in black and white or in color? I think you can really see the value of coloring, especially good coloring, when you compare a black and white piece of artwork to the same piece of artwork colored. I always think that a colorist can either save bad art or it can kill good art. And the best coloring is so that you don't notice it. So we're sort of the unsung people in comics. I mean, nobody runs up to a colorist, or there's very few colorists that you run up to and say, oh, I want your autograph, I love you, you know. It's usually the writers and the pencilers who get all the glory. But colorists definitely add something.
If I'm drawing a book and I know that Lynn Varley's going to color it, I draw it very differently. And I guess because what I do is an unfinished job and throw it at her without comment.
When I get the page, I just get a black and white image like this. And then I add the flat colors to all the different panels, which will look something like this. A good colorist, you won't notice their work when you're reading the comic because it's so a part of the story and affects the mood of the story that it just enhances the reading of the comic. But when you have a really bad colorist work on a project, you'll notice it right away. It'll take you away from the story. You'll be like, what's happening? Why is it so bright in this scene? It's supposed to be dark and scary.
Coloring, really, what you're supposed to do is help tell the story. So you can tell the story by, if it's a flashback, you can make it monochromatic, or, you know, give some visual cue that it's outside of the normal story continuity as you're reading. If there's something that's in the background that's not as important, well, you shouldn't highlight that or make it in a color that's going to draw your eye to that thing if that's not the important thing on the page.
And since this panel is going to be really driven by like his eyes being the light source, make them really bright. You can use other tools besides the brush, like the gradient, to throw on and add other effects, like his eyes are really growing. Hooray. And this is the part where it really gets fun, because this is like you being a gigantic kid, like I said, and really, it brings the story to life. Because the flat colors are just like, you gotta slug through that and get that done. But then what really makes the story are the highlights and the shadows. All right, so in this page, we have our characters coming together to talk about how they're gonna save their universe. And so in this first panel, we have 3 of the characters coming out of like the shadows and the darkness from which they traveled through. Even though we know the characters are good, it's still kind of an eerie place that they're coming from. So keeping that mood consistent in that panel. And then here they're meeting with some of the other characters. And the artist provided shadows for me on the floor of a light source coming from over on the right-hand side of the page. But then I also added the light source of the spear from the staff. And so I try to light that and keep the mood consistent of kind of having it serious and ominous. And from there, I'll add the textures. Like for the background in this wall here, there's kind of like a speckly texture that I throw on, and I can turn that layer off and you can see how it affects the actual image. It kind of makes it pop and brings it to life. It's like being a big kid and you're coloring a gigantic coloring book full of really awesome stories and really cool characters.
Right now, the colorists are so pivotal to this medium. 10 years ago, they weren't. A lot of coloring was done in Ireland and China, and it was all done and no one cared. But now coloring has become very important.
As a colorist, and this is particular to colorists, we're like the last line of defense. So if the writer is late 2 weeks, then it's going to affect the penciler, which is going to affect the inker, which is going to fall on the colorist's lap.
Comics are basically a gigantic collaboration that's brilliant, and everybody is important to it. I mean, you don't want to be opening up a comic book and then have like a little misspelled lettering balloon, knowing that a penciler spent 40 hours on a page and basically was giving his entire week up to draw that one page and put the week behind schedule. You don't want to be the guy that let that lettering balloon mistake occur. So everything has to be tight and on par with each other.
I started the store and would have writers and artists come in and do signings on the books. And they all had the same story, that the characters they created they didn't own. Once they signed the check, they were gone. So it occurred to me that if there's a comic book company that paid reasonable rates and let the creators own or co-own the characters they created, it seemed to me that that might be a good business plan. Thus was Dark Horse. So we're at the mercy of the creator, and that's part of what our deal is. I mean, a creator gets to, publishes with us, he owns his own work, and so we're sort of at his mercy.
If you're working on something like Superman or Batman, obviously it's work for hire. It's, at the end of the day, you're able to contribute something to the mythos, but you don't own it. You're a farmhand. But if you go to some of the smaller publishers, that's when you get a chance to have bigger pieces of the pie. I mean, a lot of the stuff I've done at smaller companies for, books called Empire, books called A Hunter Killer at Top Cow, these are things that I own, or at least have an interest in with the artist, and we have a greater percentage of.
20 years ago, when Image hit, it hit like a bomb. Nothing had ever happened like that in comics before. We were at the top of our game. We saw a better way of doing things. We saw an opportunity for ownership. We no longer had to give away our characters, didn't have to give away our creations. If we all formed this together, the 7 of us, we had a chance. And that's what we did. All of us, all 7 of us, we had one thing in common. We hated people telling us no. We just hate it to this day. So for us, it's the spirit of independence is the spirit of pure creativity, unfettered creativity, uncensored creativity, and complete 100% ownership of what you do.
I just wanted to be able to write the stories I wanted, draw the artwork I wanted, and be able to have the mood and the characters and the type of stories that I wanted. And I got tired of drawing somebody else's stories and doing stuff that somebody else wanted. I mean, so it wasn't that I was smarter, it wasn't that I was better, I just wanted to do my own thing, unfettered, good, bad, or indifferent.
And today Image Comics is stronger than it's ever been. It has more respect than it ever had. It's more diverse than it's ever been. And it literally owns its own space. It's no longer a niche publisher, but it's a breeding ground for fresh, different ideas that people respond to. And we're happy and proud of that.
And because they were artists that were now running the company, their focus was the art. And so the bar was raised majorly.
And they did amazingly well. Yeah, the numbers on those books are numbers that we'll probably never see again, to be quite honest with you, in this country. It was, yeah, it was, I mean, I'd estimate that Spawn books probably sold about 1 million each. When they did the resurgence of the X-Men, which pretty much that same period, they did the 4 covers. I think that went to almost 3 million copies. And I look at a good selling book these days, and if it hits 100,000 copies, you know, they're doing cartwheels.
There was an artificial sort of speculation boom in the early 90s, which actually we helped create, where people were buying a lot of copies of books thinking they were going to put their kids through college.
So what happened after a while is just kept going, numbers were huge, kids kept buying 5, 10 copies, investors started buying 10, 20 copies. 2, 3 years later, when the kids wanted to try selling these back to the comic book stores, well, the comic book stores still had them. It wasn't like they were really a valuable product. I mean, they were somewhat of a hot product, and it was something you could sell, but they weren't really worth anything, because you had 1 million copies that kids had put in bags and boards and were always going to be in perfect condition.
The only reason why the books from the 40s and 50s and 60s and all these are so valuable is because there's so few of them, because of the paper drives of World War II and all these things. And you know, if you have that few of copies available, then something has a collectible back issue value. But if you've got something where, you know, there's 1 million of them and they're all sitting in somebody's little white box in the corner of their house, it's worthless. You know, I mean, in terms of a back, it's not worthless in terms of creative and the enjoyment of it, but it's worthless in terms of being able to resell it.
So it became, you know, it just became an oversaturation process that really got that sharp cutoff at the end, where people were, like I said, disillusioned because they thought they were, you know, 12-year-old stockbrokers with all of their, you know, copies of Spawns and, you know, the like that.
I would like to say I'm a big comic book collector. That's really much all I collect, and I enjoy it. I like it a lot. I don't mind spending the money.
12 cents. How much is that worth now?
About 30,000.
Really?
This particular copy.
That's the #1, right?
Well, pretty much, yeah, it's first appearance.
And they're like, this is an important cover historically in comic books because it's the second appearance of Hobgoblin. This is a Legion cover, the Legion of Superhero. There's a Legion of fans of the Legion of Superheroes. And because it's a Neal Adams Legion cover, very, very collectible. Again, Jack Kirby, who created Thor. It's a splash from Journey into Mystery 107, and it's Thor fighting the Grey Gargoyle. And again, it's the best time period to collect Jack Kirby by the best inker, Chick Stone, who inked him at that time. So there's a lot of nuances. You not only want the right artist with the right storyline, it's going to be the right time period, the right inker inking the penciler. So there's a lot of variables you have to go into pricing and value and desirability.
I remember when I bought X-Men 137, which was when Phoenix dies, the death of Phoenix. I didn't get it when it came out, and a few months later, whatever, it was like $7, and this was back in '81, I think. And my mom got so pissed that I spent $7 on a comic. I spent it was like my birthday money, and she was like, "Oh, it better be made out of gold or something."
But that's for us. We target 2 markets. There's the reader market and the collectible market. Anything you ever see from us that has a gold foil stamp, limited to 100 copies, well, clearly that's targeted for a collector. Then we have the reader sets we do in the trade paperbacks, which are clearly targeted for the reader market. So those are 2 very disparate markets. And I think the publishers that are aware of that are able to capitalize on that and make a lot more money than those that aren't.
Basically, we're in a business where we're competing with companies like Marvel and DC, but also other companies. In the comic shops, the direct sales market, Marvel and DC may own 70% of the market, and maybe between the next 3 we own 12 to 15%, and then 100 other companies get what's left.
I think one of the greatest things about it is there's really nothing holding you back if you want to experiment. You can try different things. And I think that really is more up to the independents, because it's just like filmmaking. You got independent guys who are willing to push the edge and try different things, whereas the big 2, Marvel and DC, are a little more conservative.
Kids who are drawing and writing their own comics and then going to their mom's office copier to run off as many copies of comics as they want, they aren't that far from what the professionals are doing. All they need is more time and dedication and focus to get to it. But they're on the right track just by doing that, by making their own comics, folding them, stapling them together, and just getting them to their friends and whoever might be interested.
You don't have to deal with rejections when you're publishing your own stuff. So.
And the hard thing about doing your own book is no one's paying you to do it. So
You know, if you have a mortgage, you have bills to pay. It's hard.
So basically, this is our first comic convention, and we're here promoting our very first publication. It's called Brick Jones, Attorney for Earth. Basically, it's about a no-good attorney who, through a weird twist of fate, has to represent the Earth to the interstellar community. So basically, he's saving the Earth from alien invasion, one case at a time.
This comic book is called Brody's Law, and basically, it's about a character, an East End gangster, who comes across a power that means that he has to soul search.
I'm J.P. Roth, author of Ancient Dreams and Southern Nightgown. Ancient Dreams is the love story of the gods, and Southern Nightgown is a steampunk romance. That's very beautiful as well.
So basically, it's a story of tattooed body-pierced kindergartners saving the world from alien invasion.
Okay.
And Chastity's about a female rocket race car driver in a retro 40s future, sort of a speed racer meets a rocketeer.
Oh, nice.
A lot of fun action-adventure type of piece.
This right here is Black Bastard. It's 100% wrong, but 110% fun. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
He was a dog, and then he was at the city dump. So then toxic waste fell on him, and then got electrocuted.
It's a really hard world out there right now in comics for, I think, retailers, because you get that previews catalog, and everybody orders from the opening pages. It's Image, DC, Marvel, you know, Dark Horse, and that eats up all their orders. And then there's still like 200 pages of independent things that they have to go through and try to figure out what's good. And I mean, I'm amazed that they manage to find some of my stuff sometimes.
Golden Apple is a full-line comic book store, so we carry all the large publishers' works, Marvel and DC and Dark Horse and Image. But we also carry small publishers. Tonight there's guys who are self-publishing a comic that are here selling their comic on a card table. And so we have a whole section of independent self-publishers, and we tend to support anything that's good entertainment.
I mean, quite honestly, I think I could pretty much sell any book that I was really into just by putting it in my customer's hands and going, you really should try this. A book like The Goon that Dark Horse puts out, we move a ton of that book because it's really, really good. There's plenty of titles like that. You just got to be, you know, willing to, you know, try and branch people out into new stuff.
What I enjoy most about my job is the people that we service and the product. When the product's good and exciting, it's really neat. So what I do is I bring them stuff that makes them happy and that they can enjoy, and it makes them better people and me a better person for doing it.
People that come in here, I've never worked at a store where I actually enjoy the customers. Like, I love talking to them. I'm not like, oh, okay, go away. I'm just like, wow, I want to hear your story, and I want to hear what you like. I want to hear your recommendations. I want to hear how your day is. I want to get to know you. Yeah.
I love my clientele. It's like, you know, it's nice to get opinions from them to what I should be reading and vice versa. It's nice when a guy asks me, you know, what should I be reading? And they take our advice and they come back and they're like, wow, that's a great read. I really enjoy doing it. I love the art form. I love seeing new product coming out. And I mean, honestly, I've been doing it so long now, I don't really know what else to do.
Comic-Con is the largest popular culture and comic book convention in North America. You know, you can see photographs of Comic-Con, you can read about Comic-Con, you can see footage of Comic-Con, but there's nothing like being at Comic-Con. So if you've never come here, I'd say it's at least something you should try at least once in your life. This is a San Diego event, but people come from all over the country and all over the world. When we started so many years ago, we were always fans of comic books and movies. One of our first guests was Frank Capra. So there's always been a movie and comic book tie-in with this event. But what we've noticed over these past 37 years is an increased participation, not only from movie companies, but from toy manufacturers, game developers. So you can see it all at this event. It kind of becomes the epicenter for pop culture, if you will. There's a film festival, seminars on breaking into movies, seminars on how to become a comic book artist or creator. Our main focus was to try to bring comic art and creators to the general public, to have them get an understanding that comic art is a viable art form.
For those wearing costumes, it gives them a chance to act the characters that they love so much.
The sports world, you know, you get to wear jerseys and all that kind of stuff, and this is just like the Super Bowl. You know, you get to come out in costume and you get to really express how you feel about your favorite shows and your favorite artists.
I started the magazines almost 20 years ago, Wizard Magazine, Toy Fair, and what we wanted to do was really create a live version of what we did in the magazines. So we really want to give people access to this world in a way that they just can't get by seeing it online or just in the magazines or seeing it on television. Because the characters, even though they originated in comic books, they become so popular around the world in so many different ways that we really wanted to create an environment where people, no matter where they discovered their characters that they like or enjoy, you know, this is the place where they can go to find them.
Oh, it's great. It's like, it's Geek Mardi Gras. It's fantastic.
This is kind of a fan fest, if you will. It's an opportunity for, you know, people who go to the store, buy the comic book to actually meet who their heroes are.
When you're walking through that line and there's the creator of your favorite character who sits and slaves over that page every day, and he basically created this role model or this icon that you have, you know, so now you have the icon and you have the icon behind the icon. So it's like a double whammy.
I never can understand why people get angry if someone asks for an autograph. You know, to me, it's the greatest compliment that somebody would want your signature for some reason.
It was such a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you very much. No, I love it when fans come up to me.
If you've been a fan of Stan Lee, or if you've been a fan of Jim Lee or some other creators, you have an opportunity here to kind of pick their brain about why they did things, what were their choices with this, what they plan to do in the future. Over the 4 days, we get in excess of about 15,000 professionals from all of those different, you know, genres. And those professionals give of their time and their expertise to actually talk to the attendees who come here, and it's a pretty amazing event.
There's a first time where you, oh my gosh, that's Stan Lee? You know, or oh my gosh, that's John Romita Jr.? Or, wow, that's that person, and you know, there was kind of a sense of, wow, you know, it's like I'm here amongst legends. See, you idolize these people for their writing, for what they do, and then when you meet them, it's like you have this image of them, like, whoa, will they be nice? You know, they have to be nice. And some of these people are super nice, you know, just fun-loving, you know, really into the fans, and that's the type of guy that you want to sometimes keep reading their stuff. So when you see, hey, something's coming out by them, you want to support them, why not?
You know, they wait their hours sometimes just for one sketch from you. So I'm always happy to give sketches and signatures whenever they want it.
Coming to a convention like this, getting to come to something like this where you meet the people who have been buying the movies and paying the tickets to go see the movies and turning on their TV and tuning in when I'm on, this is where I meet them all, you know? And we do this in all the cities across the country, across the world even. And it's amazing to be in, you know, Auckland, New Zealand, and have somebody come up and go, oh, I'm such a big fan of your work. And like, wow, you don't realize the reach that it has. And so for me to be able to sit at a table like this with all my pictures spread out that represent my career so far, and to be able to grab a fan and to hug on his face and say, thank you so much for loving me, and for without you, I don't have a job. And that is true. Without you, I do not have a job. So, mwah, mwah, mwah.
For whatever reason, my mom raised me to like people, and I really like people. And, you know, I don't really meet too many bad people at conventions. They're pretty much nice folk, and they're very happy to be there.
You know, I kind of like them to remember me, you know, it's like, hey, that was a pretty cool fan, because I think they're cool.
If there's a comic creator you respect, man, you can be having drinks with the person later that night, which it's really fun.
When we have new artists, we can take them to a convention and have them do a signing, and people are going, who are they? what do they do? Who are they? You know, so it's a great way to create buzz like that. It's a great way to market your books. It's a great way to get buzz going out there, you know, on any new properties that you have. It's really key if you want to do comic books to go out there and tap into that passion that the fans have, not only for the property itself, but for the people who do it.
When you're at a table all day selling comic books and people come over and they want to know what your book is about and you're telling them about it, it's a real emotional roller coaster because there's certain times when there's like people at your booth and you got fans coming over going, oh, I love your work. You perfectly captured Snake's voice. That's great. You're fantastic. And you're like, I'm a god. Yes. And then there are other times it's like no one will even look at your table. You know, they just keep walking by like it's a freeway and nobody's looking at you. You're like, I am a complete freaking loser. Nobody wants to look at anything. How come they've got a line? He sucks and he's got a line. You know, why don't we have a line? You know, so.
Another one of the reasons that we go to conventions is to hopefully find new talent. If you're lucky enough at the convention to get into a submission review, you can get a lot of really good feedback on your art, and sometimes artists will actually do portfolio reviews.
And I see a lot of kids and they come to me at the shows and, you know, we have what we call, you know, portfolio reviews. And they come up to me and they, you know, they ask me what I think of their work. I've seen a lot of portfolios where they might not necessarily be able to cut it, but the comic book industry is so diverse now that you don't have to draw, you know, superhero, muscle-bound guys like my guy.
Any fan will tell you that's got a portfolio and showed me. I'm the guy at the end. I'm the last stop. When everybody else lies to you and everybody else does, I mean, guys go, they told me I was good. They told me I would get work, and I'm not getting any work. Why? Because they lied. And other people will tell them, you don't want to see Neal, because he'll tell you the truth.
You know, we've been looking at portfolios this whole weekend.
Oh, really?
Yeah, both for sculpting and for artists and inkers and writers. So we're always constantly looking for talent.
All right.
Never turn away good talent.
All right.
So what have you seen today so far?
My bank account go to zero. I saw that.
This is just my boy. It's really awesome, though. We're definitely going to be back.
This is my first Wizard World, so I have to say it's a little bit of everything. I mean, worlds came together, you know, comics, anime, superheroes, Jedi, everybody. It's just like a potpourri of stuff, so it was pretty cool. I enjoyed it.
When you see the people at this event, whether they be families or little kids or adults or whatever, I mean, how can you not enjoy working on a project that people wait in line to get into? I can't tell you how rewarding it is. This is kind of like, you know, the epicenter of pop culture and what's cool.
There's something so American and so innocent about the whole idea of comic books. You know, it's kind of in the psyche of America, and so for the comic book store to disappear or for the comic book racks to disappear, it would just be a very sad thing.
I wouldn't worry about the comics. There'll always be a market, I think, for comic books. There'll always be people who enjoy reading them, and they'll always become springboards for movies and TV series.
I mean, I think the future of comics lies in the hands of the creators and the fans. I mean, if there's a comic out there you like, support it and you know, water it and let it grow.
Go to your local comic book shop, check out the comic books, pick them up, check them out, find what works for you, and get out here and support these artists.
Just get out there and read a book, you know. Go online, pick up your iPad, walk into a store, pick up the newspaper, just read comics. It's great to read comics.
If you really want to get into comics and do it professionally, just love it and be stupid enough not to quit.
If you want to be an artist, all you can do is draw. The more you draw, the better you'll be. And draw everything. Carry a notebook with you. If you're walking in the street or in a store and you're looking out the window, draw lampposts, draw a hydrant, draw cars, because a comic book artist has to be able to draw everything, anything and everything.
Practice. There's nothing else you can do but practice. Because like I said, it's like playing the piano.
and you have to get better. The only way to get better is to either be a prodigy and build from that, or to work your butt off. It's like, I'm the slow white guy on a basketball team. You gotta work extra hard to be better. You know, there's a lot of Michael Jordans around. They just are born brilliant. So what you have to do is work extra hard at it. And I think that's the only way to improve.
You want to write, the only way to write, there are two things you have to do. You have to read as much as you can, and you have to write as much as you can. The more you write, the better you get, and the more you read and absorb of other writers and other styles.
Just don't give up. There are so many people who are looking for things, and they're all different. If you haven't found your niche yet as a penciler, maybe you need to change your style up. Maybe you just haven't found the right publisher, you know? Just do it because you love it. And if you love it, that's enough reason to do it.
If you're a writer, find an artist out there who's looking to do some portfolio pages or trying to break in as well. Do your own comic, even if it's just a black and white, something that you print up at Kinko's and you run off a bunch of copies. That's the easiest way in, because at the end of the day, editors are busy putting out their own little fires, but they want to be shown that you know what you're doing.
Today, you don't have to go out and find a publisher to put it into reality. You can do your own work and you can put it up on your own website, and there are huge websites with webcomics. People have become very successful just starting their own little strip that's something very personal to themselves and become something much bigger.
But you really need to pursue what you want to do, you know, and you got to give it a shot. Got to give it a shot. What do you got to lose? As they say, the worst they can do is say no.
Don't be too sensitive. Take criticism, you know, and use it to get better, you know. And you got to be really tenacious about it. I think tenacity is a huge part of getting into the business, because it's hard. It is hard to get into it.
You can't give up if you get rejection, because there's so many people trying to get their work published in comics. You have to be able to take rejection. So you have to have the faith in your own work. You have to be realistic about your work too. If it's not there yet, compare it to the best. And if it's not there, and don't copy the best, just compare it to the best. And if it's not there yet, work on it, but continue to work.
Don't even think you're gonna get rich, you know, because the chances of that happening are pretty slim. And just do it because you love it. Because I think that's what really shows through in the end too.
If you got something you want, just don't listen to anybody who tells you no, because you can do anything.
If you're in this medium and you're doing superhero comics, you're contributing to a greater legacy. You're contributing to a vast, almost reality that, you know, that exists that you're only a little tiny part of, but you're able to contribute a little bit to it, and it sustains beyond you.
I owe a lot to comics. I owe a great relationship with my father to comics. I owe a lot to comics in general. And I'd like to be able to believe that at some point, comics will owe a lot to me.
Whatever I've built of a career and of a name, it has allowed me to work with some really talented people, the best in the business. And I'm thankful for that, I really am. And especially thankful to the fans, because if they didn't support what I do, I couldn't do that.
So yeah, don't let anyone tell you can't do it, because anybody can do it. I mean, look at me, I'm doing it.
Now, if you could have a superpower, what would it be?
Bruce Wayne's money.
Ah, money is the key to every superpower, right?
Exactly.
I'd like to fly.
Flight's got to be the best. You know, just to be able to fly. How great is that?
Especially when I'm in the LA freeway system sometimes, like in your, if I could just spring above and fly. Yeah, definitely.
I said once that I'd like to be able to fly. I changed that. For 1 month, I want to be Superman, a Superman. That would be one good month to take care of business, being a Superman.
I would have the magical ability to keep people from taking pictures of my butt when I don't want them to.
Can't I just have them all?
If any superpower, I'd say be able to teleport anywhere in the universe.
Super speed by far, it's without a doubt is the one superpower I'd love to have.
Force fields and being invisible.
Why is that?
Because then you could like sneak around and do things and spy on people and then shield yourself. I don't know.
I think I'd have the power of a cartoon character where they can pull out anything from behind their back. That would be the best.
I wouldn't want to read everybody's minds. I'd get too depressed about humanity. So I wouldn't want that. Invisibility, nah.
If I could have a superpower, and this is a very strange one, I'd like to see color. I'm colorblind.
Oh.
And my superpower would be able to see color like everybody else.
If there was some magical superpower where I could, conjure up a way of repaying everybody I owe thanks to, that would be cool.
The power of infinite wishes. I would want every single wish I would make to come true.
Mind control. I could sell anything I want.
Oh, stop aging. That would be nice. The ability to not get a hangover anymore.
My superpower would be that I could will world peace in an instant. Nice. How about that?
Somewhere far beyond this space and time, unknown. Believe in fantasy, something you never outgrow. Never giving up the ultimate victory. Marvel at inspiration, true humanity. We all dream, looking for heroes on the silver screen. We can dream, searching for answers to life's mysteries. Over the rainbow where the spirit and mind run free. Castles and fairy tales in a world of make-believe. Imagination, unrestricted reality. All our hopes come true in some surreal fantasy. We all dream, looking for heroes. Turn around and you will see. Why are we